purpose of this channel is to speak truth and for us to establish the truth. Me, Elliot, or anybody that comes on this channel as a guest are not the messiahs. We don't, profess to know everything. We're just giving our points of view based on evidence that we perhaps have looked up, perhaps our own opinion even. And all I'd ask anybody that's a guest or watching this channel is to look up and do their own research. Don't take what we are saying as fact, and just look into things themselves. There's plenty of information out there, and it doesn't mean that it has to come from the BBC or any of the mainstream channels or medias like ITV or anything like that. There is alternatives out there for finding information. And unfortunately, at the minute, it seems to be disparity in the information in the mainstream media.
Mm.
1 minute we're told by the WHO not to wear masks. They went about reporting not to wear masks in the mainstream media, and then the next stage we're all supposed to wear masks.
It's not really been handled well. I think, though, it's all classic psyop, not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I think it's all classic sort of psyop sort of tactics where you use basically just a constant stream of information that is conflicting in order to make people disenfranchised or just to check out in general. There's actually, funnily enough, on the BBC of all places, there's a great documentary which sort of talks about this sort of political tactic in abstract terms, not in like saying that it's happening now or anything, but it's like this is a thing. It's called hypernormalization. It's quite interesting. It goes into sort of the war in Iraq and all that sort of thing, and it's basically about fake news. It came out a couple of years ago. Would have been around the time that Trump was running for office. But it's quite good. I do recommend giving it a watch if you're at all interested in what the BBC's take on this sort of activity would be.
Well, there's a lot of people out there that can give good information. I don't discredit the BBC entirely. I just think at the moment there are some severe conflicts of interest. Yourself from the discussion we've previously had with the statue. We'll just take the statue outside Broadcasting House. We both know that that statue is very controversial, to say the least.
Just a wee bit suspect.
And so there are some credibility point of views with the BBC, just from where they're getting their funding. And going on that subject of where they're getting their funding, when they're getting it from the foundation, which shall remain nameless because you get a strike. But it's the opposite of a fence, shall we say, and you would use it to enclose. It's quite apt, actually, to use that foundation. And or we could, for the sake of this channel, if you like, the Hindley and Brady Foundation. And I think that'll resonate with a lot of people. But with regards to them, they are sort of funding the BBC, if you like, and that is fact. That's not conspiracy. That's fact. Another thing that's fact is Patrick Vallance. Has got £5.8 million worth of shares in GlaxoSmithKline Pharmaceuticals, who are going to be doing our vaccines in Great Britain. And he is also instrumental in our lockup, shall we say, and our imprisonment until the vaccine is around. So in any other walk of life, take conspiracies out of the question, take it out of the agenda. In any walk of life, if you've got a man that's going to stand to make a few quid out of something and then is sort of legislating it, that shouldn't be happening. Not in today's society. It shouldn't be happening.
No.
People should be asking questions, and why ain't the mainstream all over that? I mean, the only paper that reported it this week was the Telegraph. They were the only ones.
It's an obvious conflict of interest, and there's a hell of a lot of it out there at the minute. I mean, I don't know why journalists seem to have all become disconnected. There's something about journalism in the modern world that has gone off the rails some. I know it's not entirely related, but there was a movie recently released on Netflix. You might have heard about it. It was quite controversial. It was called Cuties.
Yes, I unsubscribed to Netflix because of it.
Yes, well, because of this movie, there was a joke going around that everybody on the internet finally agreed on something, because it seemed like everybody was unanimously confused as to why Netflix would think that putting that on their platform was a good idea, until journalists got involved and said that it was a right-wing conspiracy to take down the movie because it was directed by a ethnic female, so which was quite funny. As that was their takeaway from the controversy.
Which is okay, fine, and that's one way of looking at it. And let's be honest, Ricky Gervais mentioned that women aren't treated fairly in the Oscars, that's a fact. That's not a conspiracy. That's a fact, and all power to Ricky Gervais for mentioning that, and all power to females that are bringing up movies in Hollywood and everything else. But you can't take away the other fact, and the guy who gave the award in the Cannes Festival for this Cuties was a convicted paedophile, and Netflix, a multiple convicted paedophile, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on that fact, but I think he was a multiple or serial paedophile. And obviously, we've got to look at responsibility here when they are sort of making a documentary, when you've got children dressed in that way and being encouraged to almost be sexualized in a movie, and then you've got a paedophile giving it an award. So yeah, and advertising that fact. So if nothing else, I mean, Netflix didn't even advertise that it was done by an ethnic female, and why would they? Because it shouldn't be highlighted for that fact, because everybody's equal. So they just went on the fact that it had an award, and like I say, that award lost all its credibility the minute that guy was convicted.
I don't know if Netflix just didn't do its homework, but it feels to me that it was in some way a orchestrated move, because it was heavily promoted on the platform. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know.
It's quite alarming. I think the world we're in right now is alarming, and like you mentioned that with Netflix, we were talking about a massive platform.
Mm-hmm.
They can't make mistakes like that. They just
no.
can't. No. I mean, like you say, it could be that they just genuinely didn't do their homework, and it's one of them things. Either way,
I haven't seen it. and I don't intend on, but I have watched a review of it by by a very good YouTuber, Sean Head, and she says that you'd have to be quite stupid to not instantly sort of figure out that there was something off about the movie. And yes, apparently the point of the movie, so to speak, is that exploitation of children is bad, but it still does it, which is interesting, to say the least. But anyway, back on to COVID. Saw an interesting article the other day that was on my Google News on my phone when I woke up, and it was mentioning how wearing a face mask boosts your immunity to COVID-19 and how it will reduce how sick you get from COVID-19. I mean, if you type it into Google, you'll find hundreds of, well, a fair few articles from Global News, Medical Express. Telegraph says face masks could be giving people COVID immunity. There you go. So Telegraph, The Express, Metro, New York Times. So there's all these papers.
Did you know on that subject alone that the New York Times CEO, which I won't cover this too much on this sort of podcast, but did you know that the CEO was actually resigned from the New York Times?
No, I did not.
Which is quite interesting because the CEOs around the world seem to be dropping like flies ever since this outbreak of COVID, shall we say. It's quite convenient. Like Mr. Gates, for instance, he quit in January, Microsoft, and stepped down from Microsoft to do his good works around the world, shall we say, if people buy into that. But yeah, Mr. Gates stepped down from Microsoft.
Be careful, you've said his name 3 times now.
Yeah, well, I can say that he stepped down because that is actual fact. There's no conjecture with it. And, you know, he has stepped down from his position for, I can never say this word properly, philanthropy. That's the one.
Oh, yes. You've still got some sun rays coming in. You look very godly. It's quite nice.
The first time anyone's ever said that about me, but yeah, he stepped down for them sort of purposes. But you know, just addressing that alone, I mean, that's really alarming what you've just said there. Facts. Let's not look at conspiracies. Just look at facts. According to the narrative, a virus can only transmit through loose air particles at 0.2 microns. Now, unless you've got an N95 mask, which is a medical one, there is no way that any of the masks can be effective. And on the subject of masks, there is no criteria for masks. You can do this. Cut a pair of underwear and put them over your face. You can wear fancy pretty ones that you see that people wear, you know, designery ones, Burberry ones and all this, which I think is akin to...
I mean, you can, like, the masks that I've been wearing to go to the shops without being hassled by, you know, the denizens of Ilfracombe.
But again, you don't have to be, because under the Equalities Act,
I know,
but you don't have to be, you know.
I just find,
in a minute.
You know, sometimes it's easier to pretend you're a good law-abiding citizen than fear the thought police, you know. But I was torn then between Gestapo and thought police. I went for a 1984 reference just to, you know.
But
But no,
it's
you can
it's
see the weave on the mask that I wear, and you can see the weave on the masks of 90% of the people that have bought into it.
well, the thing is, 0.3 microns is what these masks.
The medical masks.
No, 0.2 microns is where the virus can travel into.
Yeah.
It's that small. It's that minute.
Mm-hmm.
Or shall we say, not a virus as such. Anything loose, like a sneeze. If somebody's sneezing, basically the loose particles of that, for you not to contract anything from that person to transmit into you, you'd need a mask that would do 0.2 microns. And most of these masks do 0.3 microns.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my argument is with the government, if there is a mask and this is proven, why is it that the advisors said, 3 advisors said, it's not worth having them because of the microns? And why is it that there was never a risk assessment done? I mean, you know yourself, risk assessments these days, we're in a nanny state. You've got to do a risk assessment when you're talking about 67 million people.
Well, I mean, this part of this might be down to the new viruses giving you immunity. The masks giving you immunity paradigm. This is an interesting. I'm just going to read a section of the New York Times article. It says the unproven idea, which is good. They say that it's unproven. Well done, you.
They have to.
Described in a commentary published Tuesday in the New England Journal of Medicine, is inspired by the age-old concept of variolation, whatever that is, the deliberate exposure to a pathogen to generate a protective immune response. First tried against smallpox, the risky practice eventually fell out of favor, but paved the way for the rise of the modern vaccines. So perhaps that's where they're thinking, these things will help. But I don't think they're actually thinking any of that. I think they're just being told by, this is my personal opinion, this is based on nothing other than conjecture, but I think they're being told to do it to sort of get people used to following orders and guidelines that come from a place of complete and utter sort of dogma, just doing something for the sake of doing it. I think that they're aware of the numbers. They're aware that their response is ridiculous. You compare it to the Spanish flu, you compare it to any of the pandemics that have been around in the last 100 years. There's been countless of them. There was one in the 80s that was a massive thing. I mean, back when there was attacks of, like, in what was it called? There's a 2001 anthrax attack. Sorry, that's what I was
I'm
thinking of. Right. So
yeah.
Anthrax is like super deadly, right?
Yeah.
And people were aware of the fact that people that there was certain organizations just chucking them into random public places. They didn't lock the whole world down for that.
No.
They don't lock the world down for flu, which kills way more people every year than this has.
Well,
they don't lock the world down because people they haven't stopped people driving cars, which is a weird one. They haven't banned smoking. They haven't banned the consumption of donuts. All of these things, obesity, heart disease, cancer, all of these things have much higher death rates than coronavirus, and that's using the government's numbers.
Can you actually see my screen?
I can, yeah. You are.
Have a look at this. This is from the Times. And this is their official of the 22nd of September. And the daily death roll, which is something we've never had before till coronavirus, funnily enough. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But we're having a daily now to put the fear of shit into everybody. Cancer, as you can see, is quite high. It's the highest. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
As you go down, Kung Flu, or COVID, as we like to call it these days, is down to just 17 deaths.
So it's just over half of flu Strange.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, out of those 17, which is that the whole UK?
Yeah. This is the UK as of Tuesday, the 22nd of September, 2020. Bearing in mind the strict...
I guarantee you, most, if not all of them, will be care homes and people over the age of 60.
You know, the ONS website has put some interesting research in as well, which is what Dominic Raab fell short of the other day during his Talk Sport interview. What he was asked, a very taxing question for an MP. How many deaths has it actually been for people under the age of 60 since February 2020? And he didn't have a clue. He just genuinely didn't have a clue. So the presenter had to tell him the data and the information of how many deaths it was. And it was 307, Elliot.
It's pretty amazing.
Well,
do you want to know? This is the United States. This is data for the United States. This is on the CDC.gov. So this is the CDC's numbers. So the deaths involving COVID from under 1 year is 20. 1 to 4 years, 15. 5 to 14 years, 31. This is the thing.
That's 300 million people in the United States. I didn't sort of...
15 to 24, 353. 25 to 34, 1,457. This is still basically a rounding error, right? 35 to 44, 3,809. 45 to 50, 45 to 54, 10,057. 55 to 64, 23,000. This is where it gets interesting. 65 to 74, 40,000. So it doubles.
Yeah.
After that point. And these are ages when people usually sort of tend to die anyway. And not to be glib, but...
But, you know, I mean, all of this is serious stuff because people are dying. We're not unsympathetic.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just...
But deaths involving pneumonia, with or without COVID, right? This is excluding influenza deaths, is basically like within younger years, it's a lot higher. So it's 105 under 1, 73 between 1 to 4. Obviously, it levels out towards the end because there's not as many people between the ages of 25 and 40 that are dying from pneumonia. But if we look at influenza, 16, 42, 52, 53, 151. Yeah, so it's you know, it's no different really. You know, they're shutting down the whole world when it's nothing more than your average sort of flu or, you know, pneumonia, influenza type thing, and they have not shut the world down for that. It's been around for ages, and
not only that, it you know, none of this is conspiracy. None of this is not fact. This is all
this is their figures.
And not only that, it actually says that on the British government's website as of the 19th of March. You know, I've shared this on the screen, just going back to the masks, because I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I just want to draw a line in the sand, as it were. And with the masks, the Equalities Act of 2010 prohibits people being mask Nazis, if you like. They can't just go and dictate. So I think you're familiar with that video that was on Twitter, that was trending with that policeman. And, you know, as you can see there, that policeman totally broke the law in dealing with that individual, from the footage that I could see anyway, at least, because I didn't see all of it. So, you know, I don't want to comment too much about the policeman in terms of what he'd done. Before you can see from the footage, it looked as if the policeman wasn't following the Equalities Act 2010 when it came to that, you know, because, you know, he was contravening section 112, you know, and I had, you know, this information off a very good YouTube channel, Camelot TV Broadcasting, John Mappin on the screen there, sharing out, just for people really that feel a bit uncomfortable with having a hidden disability, fearful, struggling on with masks, people with COPD and things like that, who would really struggle to wear a mask and take footsteps, because there are 1 in 5 people in the UK that have got a hidden disability. You know, people are afraid, and they need to stop being afraid, because the government has got that legislation there in place to make them safe and to be able to visit their shops that wearing masks. And the Sunflower Hidden Disabilities website is pretty good, you know, because people can go and order a lanyard and things like that, and then they can feel comfortable without, like you said, without being victims of thought abuse or thought, you know, because you do feel uncomfortable being the only one to go in and not have a mask
definitely
on.
And I think that's why I've wilted under the intense glare.
That was Trafalgar Square today, so there's lots of people, as you can see. I'm not going to say whether we condone or support or anything like that. All I am saying is, clearly, with the amount of people in attendance today, there is a heck of a lot of people that are fed up with what's going on. So it's not conspiracy anymore, you know, it's actually conspiracy realism going on here, because people have had enough. You know, they want answers, because what these guys are saying is not making sense. And, you know, I'll support that.
Well, I mean, you just have to look at social media. I mean, I know this is not necessarily the most, you know, deep, substantial thing to look at, but you look at the way people are joking about things, you know, the way that they're creating these memes based on what Boris is saying. You see all these memes about how, you know, coronavirus is completely and utterly chilled out, happy, up until 9:59 p.m.
Yeah.
And then suddenly flips, you know.
Well, that what you showed me the other day with Boris, I mean, we're talking about a guy that's very educated. He is very educated, Boris Johnson.
He knows what he's doing. I've read some of his articles, you know. He's a clever man.
And to actually come out with that drivel. But I like to call him something different now, just because I just don't take him seriously anymore when he comes out with garbage like that. So I call him Porridge Swanson.
That's fair.
Because he's just, you know, I mean, only a lunatic would base that. I mean, speaking of loonies, we've got one right here, which I'm sharing the screen with you now, which is Chris Shetty. And, you know, he is basically going on his own words that actually coming out and saying that you haven't got much chance of dying from this. But then he's sitting on a board, a vaccine board, which has got financial interests of 348 million. And yet he's the medical officer for the country. It's, you know, this is fascinating stuff.
And I don't know if you watched the this is before all the lockdowns, before anything like happened. Basically, it was the people were aware that it was in China, and it was one of the first reports I watched on BBC News, BBC World News, I think it was, a live interview with a panel of doctors, basically trying to calm people down and say, no, look, we're not going to have to go into lockdown. It's not going to be a big thing. And they listed out reasons why it wouldn't be an issue. And one of the issues that they said was that coronavirus is an incredibly slowly mutating disease, which is quite strange when they came out a few months ago saying that we'd have to take a vaccine. What was it, once every 3 years? Something like that. I can't quite remember. But if a vaccine for, you get your MMR when you're born, you get a booster when you're 16, that's the end of that.
That used to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, flu, yes, you have to get it every year, but flu's an incredibly fast mutating virus, and it still doesn't protect you. Why then would coronavirus, if it's a slow mutating virus, need to have a new vaccine every 4 years? I don't quite understand it myself, but
it doesn't,
probably because I'm not a scientist. That's probably what the problem is.
No, but even the credible people that are sort of speaking out, there's some people out there. There's Dr. Tenpenny, there's Dr. Rashid Buttar, there was Dr. Shiva, there's many. There's Kate Shimarani. I mean, Kate Shimarani, who's been speaking out about this, has been arrested, and sort of whether you agree or disagree with Kate or not, one of the things that hit me was watching her podcast or her YouTube video that she uploaded, where she was absolutely in tears. And she was in tears because the regulations are now that they do not resuscitate patients in care homes. So if you've got somebody that's suffering from autism or anything along them lines, of a disability, the policy is now to do not resuscitate. Kate believed very strongly, and I happen to share her view actually, that that's genocide with that, Kate had been talking about sort of against the narrative. Now, whether people agree or don't agree with someone, if somebody is speaking their truth and they are speaking something and they have worked in the profession, she's been a nurse since 1984 and she decided to resign from the profession because she didn't agree with the profession. Well, that's not discrediting any of the fantastic doctors and nurses that are in the UK. But what happens if out there is malpractice? What happens, because we aren't experts, as we've just said. No. There are plenty of experts out there at the moment that are questioning this narrative. And I think at this time, it is worth looking at it, especially when the numbers we've just seen of a death roll of 450 people dying a day of cancer being the biggest killer, and yet the NHS now doesn't want to see cancer patients anymore, because of this COVID that had 17 deaths on the 22nd of September.
It's a wee bit funny, isn't it? Like, they've stopped a hell of a lot of procedures that are directly impacting the health of people with very deadly illnesses like cancer and heart disease, people that need transplants. I mean, there was already a massive backlog of people, and they're not getting seen to.
Well, I can actually give you the numbers. Before February, in January, there was 2.5 million people on the NHS waiting list. up until early part of this week, it was
Mhm.
15 million. So it's risen from 2.5 million to 15 million people waiting.
And
So
how many people will die because of these measures?
yeah,
How
absolutely.
many,
So that's the spike.
right? But the problem that I'm seeing is that, assuming the virus is as deadly as they say it is, are these measures worth it? Because if you save 10 people, let's talk small numbers. If you save 10 people by keeping them, uh, you know, keeping them separate from everybody else, but 50 of them die from other illnesses, have you really helped? No, because it is a numbers game. That's how they're viewing it. Yes, that these are individual people, and it's horrible when anybody dies, but they're trying to save. I think Boris said it himself. People are going to die. We're trying to limit that number, right?
But Porridge Bronson, as like you rightly said, I mean, he's saying a numbers game, and where I think the numbers are getting higher is these tests.
Mm-hmm.
And Dominic Raab this week, again, I don't know why the count. Yeah, he is the Joe Biden of Britain. Yeah. As a matter of fact, he makes Joe Biden look like Nikola Tesla.
Did Nikola Tesla sniff the back of young girls' heads as well?
Well, I can't, cast any aspersions on Dominic Raab in that way, but but I can tell you that, I mean, you wouldn't want him if you were the political leader of the country. You wouldn't want him with his thumb up his arse on breakfast television giving talks, because he's just hanging these morons, basically, and there's no other way to put it. He went on and he admitted that the tests, he had a little disclaimer, he made a little caveat, which was kind of good, but he admitted that the tests are no less than 7% effective. And then his disclaimer was it was in airports. So I'm like, right, so if it's 7% effective in airports, even if you just be generous and put it up to 15%, these tests ain't worth diddly. And the creator of the tests has actually said, don't use them for this. It wasn't created for this. I never invented them for this. I invented them to find other sort of diseases, not to look for a respiratory disease, So, and the numbers are out of control, but there's no deaths. But the numbers, the cases, it's like, like you said, you can eat mango. You go for a test, and the next thing you know, you're positive for COVID because you ate a mango. It's just, it's like you say, it is a numbers game, but I think the numbers, from what I can see so far, and this is only my personal opinion, are there to get everybody to roll their sleeves up and take a hypodermic needle. And that's the only thing that I can think of, because that is the only thing. Judge Judy wrote a book, Don't Piss on My Leg and Tell Me It's Raining. And, Charlie Ward, when I watch his YouTube channel, says if it looks like shit, it tastes like shit, and smells like shit, it's shit. And I think that's what we need to look at. Do you know what I mean? If it looks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. You know what I mean? We're going to have to start talking, not conspiracy theory, but conspiracy
Realism.
reality, realism, because, you've got Patrick Vallance, shares in it, so he's in bed with them. You've got Chris Whitty, on the board of a vaccine. It's all corrupt. And people need to be asking these questions. And because the mainstream media are drip feeding it, but not actually really covering it, people ain't, because they're so confused, they're getting bombarded with shit. There's no other way to describe it. It's shit.
You bombard people with enough fake news, enough news, you know, if you throw 50 lies at someone and one truth, they're not going to be able to find the truth in that pile of crap, you know? And that's exactly what hypernormalization, this BBC concept, you know, well, it's not a concept of the BBC, but you know, it's explained in that program, and I think it's definitely worth a watch. Definitely worth a watch, and it's exactly what is going on at the moment.
I'm going to check it out because prior to that, the research I did was the Nazi sort of thing, which went in conjunction with Operation Paperclip, which redistributed these delightful people around the world in high positions throughout the world. And I forget the name. I think it might have been Joseph Mengele. Don't quote me on that, but it may have been Joseph Mengele. They said the bigger the lie, told often enough and kept repeating. So their strategy was just keep repeating the lie. And then it will be believed, because the far more ridiculous it is, chances are, you know, that can't be made up. That's got to be fact. And that was one of their versions of propaganda. So this sort of ties in with what you're saying, the Beebs.
I think I've heard that quote before. If you're going to tell a lie, make it a big one and repeat it often. I think it's something along those lines.
Well,
yeah.
There's genuine psychiatrists sort of doing this, like you said, PSYOP, which I genuinely believe it is, because the very word social distancing, what's social about distancing? You know? You know what I mean? But people, yeah, social distancing must be 6 foot apart, 6. Yeah. You know, and it's like crowds of 6. Yeah. They're still not getting there because they can't connect the dots. And hopefully, by us bringing this together today, hopefully people will look at it, and whether they agree or disagree with what me and you've got to say, they'll look up for themselves, because we haven't done anything spectacular here. We've just looked and got some numbers from some sources.
It's all there. That's the depressing thing. It's all there. They put it all out there, you know, but people don't care. People
Well, I don't think they don't care. I think it's got to the point now, we've been so conditioned.
I don't know if it's even conditioning. I think they've become so disenfranchised with everything.
Yeah, and I do think
there's been a persistent nihilistic tendency in media for the past 10 to 15 years.
Well, I think there's that, and I think there is cognitive dissonance. I do think people have almost been dumbed down to coincide with what you're saying. So it's almost, you know,
if you think about, let's just think about kids' movies, right? When I was a kid in the 2000s, it was bright colors, things like The Cat in the Hat, Shrek, you know, they were like, wacky, you know, Inspector Gadget, right? It was all quite bombastic, I suppose. Whereas kids' movies nowadays, you've got Toy Story 4, you know, which is all about, which has got one of your favorite people in it, Tom Hanks.
Yeah, kind of.
But you know, it's all about the fact that there's this spoon that's trying to kill itself. You know, I'm not saying that Hollywood's, you know, got some sort of agenda, but it's just since 9/11, the sort of the world's, or at least the West's psyche has significantly changed. You know, there's no more Barney the Purple Dinosaur. You know.
Yeah, and I do think that we've been conditioned. Look, we play video games, the pair of us. We both love video games, the pair of us. But I do think if you're looking at, see, the thing is, I'm a couple of years, not much, older than you. And if you go back to the Ataris, when I was a a young lad, and I've still got an Atari, you'd go on the games and they're still entertaining. I mean, our friends Reese and Alfie, they play the retro sort of games, if you like, and I got to be honest with you, they are still entertaining. They're still good. I've sort of hooked one up and sort of played in. I've sort of played with people of your gen, and some of them, sort of like the teenagers are like, "Whoa, what?" What's all that about, type of thing. But that was the type of thing that was out in my day, and it was more innocent. Whereas now you're looking at some games and they are really graphic on how they're slitting someone's throat, ripping them apart, and there does seem to be an agenda, very much so. And they do know, I mean, whether you like it or not, there are parents that are responsible, but there's lots of
I
families.
will say things like, I imagine you're probably referencing Mortal Kombat X, things like that.
I wasn't actually thinking of any specifics, to be honest with you, but look, there's some fantastic gory detail in these games, and all, phenomenal that the developers have come that far. But I just feel that we've almost been conditioned, and whether that's deliberate or whether it's just how we've sort of been on a journey and we've ended up there. There's definitely some things in this world right now when you look at the games and they're not innocent anymore. Billy Connolly, I remember him saying, the big fire engine used to go ding-a-ling-a-ling, so you'd sort of sing it to your baby, ding-a-ling-a-ling. You can't do that now. The fire engine's wah, 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 and, your baby be like, so the world isn't as gentle as it used to be, that kind of thing. So, I do think that's right in a lot of ways, but by the same,
I was actually thinking about something along these lines this morning when I was riding my bike into work. I took the scenic route this morning up the old Victorian train line, and I was looking at the train tunnel, imagining, when they would have built it, the Victorian sort of ideology that went behind the industry and all the rest of it. And then I saw one of the, I think it was like a terminal, like a signaling house, like the little sheds that the people would sit in. Yeah. And it was covered in graffiti, all manner of just trash, basically scrawled all over it. Like, I get it, graffiti can be beautiful art, but this is far from it. And also, as I was riding through the tunnel, you've got people tagging, putting their drug dealer names all over the walls, and it's just like, I don't know, it just sort of brought an idea into focus. And obviously I didn't live through the Victorian times, so I can't tell you for sure that they were more decent people. Probably weren't, but they tried to be. They pretended to be, at least. So, and that's,
But I just think it's how we've sort of gone on this journey. Like you said, the Victorians perhaps wouldn't have had the privilege that we've had, because I think this lockdown, if it's done nothing else, it's taught us that our former lives, we were quite privileged with what we had. And one thing I think we should never take for granted is freedom, because right now our freedom is in jeopardy. And I just feel that the Victorians didn't have the opportunities that we had. You just look at the child labour and, sort of the sanitization, in places, and food and all of the things that we've got. So to see, things being sort of vandalized and mistreated, it does sort of coincide with what I believe to be an agenda. And I do believe, and this is only my opinion, but I do believe that Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, which we're seeing unfold at the minute, where businesses are going to close down. Um, people are going to have to, sort of be state reliant, on things. And then with being state reliant, that comes at a price. You've got to have a Covey app. And then that Covey app will allow you to go into certain places. And then if you
I'm not downloading it. I don't care what they were advertising the hell out of it on the radio today, and I was just like,
yeah, and the thing is, you won't be allowed to go in places because there'll only be places then that'll have it, and then that could infect employment or affect.
I mean, well, we see it firsthand.
Yeah.
We had a customer in the other day that was talking about his business. He runs a pub, and he said there's no point because he has to sit. Everybody has to have 2 staff on. He's taking 300 quid a day because people are so fucking spooked, basically.
Oh.
And you can't run a business on 300 quid a day. Sorry.
Well, most certainly can't. Where's the tiptoe?
Yeah, I think that's just slowly just turning up the heat on the frog in the pot, basically.
Spot on. And I think that's a good analogy and possibly a good place, not far for us to end here, because
Well, yeah.
I think it is pretty much that. I mean, we could go on talking for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, but I think without bombarding people, I think we've got some great content. I think 2 friends having a chat, and we can basically see where we go from there. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think it was a good little chat. I think we've covered some decent points, and I think basically all we're trying to do is point out the temperature on the old hob.
I think my message to everybody out there right now is do some research. Don't take everything as read. And if it doesn't feel right, just say no. Stop going yes, because by the time everybody is going yes, the next thing you know, your freedom's gone. And I want my freedom. I think people have fought and died for our freedom, and we need to respect that. And we also need to grow a backbone, because what I'm seeing right now is shocking.
Well, you give someone the fear of death, they're generally quite easily manipulated.
But we proved on this video there's no fear of death. We've proved that because we've shown the numbers. No, we're not saying there's no virus. We're not going against anything. All we're saying is right now, the numbers, until things change, and if they could, fine. But right now, why is every business got to close down? Why is 67 million people under lockdowns? Why is my home country in Wales suffering? They can't go, to different places. There are going to be businesses destroyed. Why is it? Shouldn't be. So there are men that need to grow a backbone. They need to, carry some balls around or whatever else and go out and fight. Do you know what I mean? I don't mean doing things illegal. I don't mean going out and smashing up things or doing anything else like that. I just mean growing a backbone, and actually, doing some research and actually going out there and, doing the normal things, sending a letter to your MP. People can do this. There are, lots of things people can do. And incidentally on that, before we end, if you ask an MP a question and they don't give you the truth and they lie to you because they are sworn in, because they're public servants for us, these elected officials that are supposedly doing things for us, it's a lifetime imprisonment. It's classed as treasonous and a lifetime imprisonment.
There you go.
You can bring these motherfuckers to task. You can bring them to task and you can get them to task. Same with Porridge Swanson and all the rest of them. You can send letters in and you can make your voice heard. We've got more power than what people believe. We've got sole sovereignty and we've got rights as living men and living women in this country. We've got more rights. And it's time now we start exercising those rights in the right way lawfully and peacefully. But we've got to start doing it now, because
do.
it can't be tomorrow. Otherwise, I don't know what people are going to say when they're taking hypodermic syringes every few months, and they've got to have an app to be able to go everywhere, and they've got to be in different zones. I haven't signed up for that. That's not the world I want to live in. Not for the sake of some fucking kung flu. Yeah? And that's what President Trump calls it, kung flu. So I think I'll use his analogy.
Right. Well, it's been fun.
Sorry, I wouldn't be Welsh if I didn't have a bit of F words in there.
No, you gotta go for it.